It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. Amid workers' protests in Greece demanding an end to austerity, the SYRIZA government agreed to a deeper examination into more structural reforms. Eurozone finance ministers made these demands to advance releasing the next installment of the 86 billion in bailout funds. Greece faces a 7.4 billion debt repayment in July. The second installment of the current bailout will be used to repay that 7.4 billion debt. On to talk about this with me is Leo Panitch. Leo is Professor Emeritus and Senior Scholar at York University, Toronto. He's the co-editor of the annual Socialist Register. He's the author of Making of Global Capitalism, the Political Economy of American Empire. Leo, it's so good to have you back on The Real News.
Hi, Sharmini.
So, Leo, amid these conversations going on between the Troika and the SYRIZA government in Greece, people are caught in between. 7 years of austerity hasn't really bailed them out of the various crises of unemployment and basic needs that they have. The austerity measures has really taken a toll on them. Tell us what's going on the ground to begin with, and then we can get into the discussion about the negotiations that are underway for the repayment.
Well, indeed, the situation remains as it's been. In fact, although there was, some optimism about growth last year, in the last quarter of 2016, there was a slowdown, and the statistics just came out saying that there was the largest net loss in jobs in January of any month over these last 7 years. Some 30,000 net loss of jobs, and the jobs that have been created are part-time, et cetera. Although people, of course, conceal in order to avoid paying taxes that are so burdensome, whether they're working a full week or 2 days a week, et cetera. That's nothing new in Greece, and the incentive to do so is all the greater. But the situation is very grave, and a piece just was published in the very, mainstream newspaper, Ikatha that is the, flagship newspaper of the country, which is very moving in terms of the food banks, serving more and more people, and people who never thought they'd have to rely on them. Deeper and deeper tranches of people are relying on food banks. So the situation is very serious.
That particular article estimated something like 17,000 to 26,000 people using the food banks in Athens alone to feed them, and these numbers have been growing over the last few years.
Yes, although that's a low number. If that's all it is, I'd be surprised. Of course, more people rely on their extended families and so on. Yeah.
So, Leo, I guess the big issue is these new structural reforms that the Troika wants to examine. What are these structural reforms they want to take a look at?
What's going on is that they're still holding this carrot of the 86 billion euro that was agreed a year and a half ago when Tsipras was forced to back down after winning the referendum, saying they wouldn't accept anymore. And essentially the Europeans said either get out of the Eurozone, and implicitly, I think, the EU, or accept a new round of cuts. And, it's indicative both of the resistance of the government and the frustration of the Europeans with what they consider a communist government still, to accept many of the conditions, and the very hard-nosed, monomaniacal insistence on the part of the Europeans on sustaining austerity, a 3.5% primary surplus, that is after they pay off debt, a 3.5% primary budget surplus, which it can't conceivably do. And the IMF's insistence that no, austerity is not so important and there ought to be some debt relief in addition to the 86 billion euros. They ought to cancel some of the debt, but their insistence, much more than the Europeans, on these structural reforms, which is that there be no return to free collective bargaining. I think that's the most important one. Plus that the pension system, which often is supporting not only pensioners, but the extended families of pensioners, be significantly reduced. It's been the case already, mind you, that the government has reduced the size of the pension payments that people make into the pension fund, which has been a bit of a relief. But those are the kinds of games that are being played. And, to some extent, it's a matter of them not trusting the SYRIZA government to do what they say they would do, or the SYRIZA government resisting even saying that they would do these things, and the others being bloody-minded on either side. I have to say, the Germans in particular still are doing what they've done the last 35 years, of what they did to the Mitterrand government in the early 80s, which is ensure that there will be austerity by saying either you agree to this 3.5% budgetary surplus or we'll break up the Eurozone. And any of these social democrats, indeed any of the radical socialist parties, whether it's Podemos or SYRIZA or Die Linke, don't want to, and have no intention of, never had any intention of, as you know from the conversations we had before SYRIZA was elected, Sharmini, never had any intention of leaving the European Union, nor would they have been elected had they expressed such an intention.
Right. And Leo, let's talk about the conflicts within the Troika itself in terms of the demands they're making on Greece. Now, IMF has taken a position of advocating on behalf of Greece, saying that there should be a cancellation of debt, some level of it. What are those divisions?
There's
How much power does the
this.
IMF have? And what kind of debt cancellation would make sense for Greece?
Well, any debt cancellation would make sense for Greece, and there's nothing new about this. Documents were leaked in recent weeks, which actually were originally uncovered by the speaker of the previous SYRIZA government as part of her debt reassessment investigation, which showed that way back in 2010, when the crisis first hit, the IMF not only reports, but divisions inside its board were all around. Look, when we see this kind of a debt load, we go for debt reduction, which does mean that some of the private banks, some of the private lenders, not the IMF itself, would take a hit. But in exchange for that, the IMF is much, much more vociferous than anybody else on neoliberal reforms, on doing away with social protections, on flexibilization of the labor market, et cetera, et cetera. So, you're drinking poison either way, Sharmini. The government has decided on balance, and it's hard to argue with this, that although they desperately need the debt relief and want it, in the longer run, they want to be able to resist this kind of extreme neoliberalism, in addition to resisting the austerity. So, as I say, you're drinking poison either way.
Now, the finance ministers and some spokespeople for the finance ministers have indicated that there's an end in sight, that the Greek people must be told and convinced that there is light at the end of the tunnel, to use their terms. So what does that mean, actually, and how are the Greek people going to get there?
Look, the question is whether they will disperse this 86 billion. And if they do disperse this 86 billion euros, that will take the pressure off. And the IMF and the Europeans would be worried then that this government, which is not a neoliberal government ideologically, however much it has been forced to cave under the thumb of these disciplinarians of financial markets, that this government would drag its heels and not introduce as much of them as they would like, would not restore business confidence, etc. There is a light at the end of the tunnel if should this be released. And it was said in the Greek media today that there's some talk that the Europeans want to get it done by April 7th, even though no payment needs to be made, as you said, until July. And the reason for that is they don't want another Greek drama hanging over these very, very important elections that are taking place in Europe this year. First, the French election in April and May, and then the German election in the fall. They don't need a Greek drama hanging over this, especially with Marine Le Pen saying that she wants to get out of the European Union, the thing can't hold together, et cetera, et cetera. And there's some fear. I think, there's some hope on Syriza's part, probably naive hope, that Schulz, the new leader of the German Social Democrats, who has shot the Social Democrats up in the polls since he has been nominated as the new chancellor candidate. There's hope on their part there would be a softening of the German position in a German election. So it's, I think, not unlikely that in fact that disbursement is going to take place. It may involve a lot of toing and froing and the IMF claiming that what they wanted is going to be done, the Germans claiming what they wanted is going to be done, the Greek government claiming what they wanted is going to be done, the New Democrats in Greece, and we need to talk about where the political situation in Greece, of course, screaming that nothing's been done or things are getting worse and we want an immediate election. And they've been doing everything they can to complicate the life of the government in every respect. So I think it's not impossible that a deal is going to be done and everybody will claim victory.
And what's happening in SYRIZA itself now? Alexis Tsipras has come out and said that he will not accept €1 in terms of more austerity. Yes. But how is all of this transpiring within SYRIZA?
That phrase of Tsipras's comes from a central committee meeting of the party that was held 2 weeks ago, where a statement was released with that exact phrase: "We will not accept €1 more." So what Tsipras has announced, not only Tsipras, the government, is that if they do have to make commitments, long-term commitments going all the way to 2019 and after, on cuts on pensions, that they would compensate for that by changes in the tax system, so that no one would be paying, there wouldn't be an additional euro of austerity. And that is reflecting exactly what the Central Committee demanded. Mind you, Tsipras didn't allow a Central Committee meeting to be called for the last 5 months until this one was called. And this one was called, no doubt, in order to show the Europeans that he's under pressure from the party. And he is under some pressure, although by no means enough. And there is some sense, the polls are showing, the latest 3 polls in the last week are showing that SYRIZA is again back up at over 20%. 2 of the 3 polls show that. They were down at around 18. And although New Democracy is well over 30%, generally about 25 to 30% of people say they're undecided. And those people who are undecided are, for the most part, not supporters of New Democracy. And you hear more and more that people are fed up with the European Union. There's some pressure from inside the party for a new strategy on the part of the Tsipras leadership. How strong that is unclear. My position, and we've talked about it often, Sharmini, is that the government could do very little given the enormous discipline of the European Union, given its own lack of interest in leaving the European Union, and given the lack of popular support for leaving the European Union, even if people are prepared to support the government in resisting it. What you had hoped from the party would have been that it would continue to be a party of education and mobilization and radicalization of the population, the kind of creation of alternative forms of production and consumption at regional and local levels. And, of course, waiting for a shift in the balance of forces internationally that might give them some room for maneuver. For the most part, the real tragedy of Greece is that that has not happened in the party. And if there's going to be, a sad obituary written for the radical left in the face of the rise of the right and the ramping up of neoliberalism, is going to be that not only SYRIZA, but also Podemos and the Sanders wing of the Democratic Party and the Corbyn wing of the Labour Party are not going to be able to do what they are promising in terms of the mobilization of socialist capacities. And that's been the real tragedy of the Greek situation. That the party has not been able to do what it should have been doing while the government was forced to do what it could avoid doing, given it wouldn't leave the European Union. And that relates to the fact that the Greek situation, the people's situation, would have been worse these last 2 or 3 years had they left. If the European Union breaks up with the election of Le Pen, for instance, what good would have that sacrifice done had they chosen to leave? So it would have been a terrible sacrifice because they don't have oil. The drachma would have been devalued. They would have needed import controls. It's not to say it might have been worth it. I'm no aficionado of this of the European Union. But the amount of sacrifice for being driven out of the global economy would have been much worse.
And Leo, finally, do you think the sentiments of the Greek people, given that there's more unemployment, more sacrifices being made, more austerity, that there's been a shift in terms of their mindset on the Grexit?
I doubt it. I don't see a lot of evidence for this, unfortunately. Were that the case, you wouldn't see so many people undecided, and you would see some support for that wing of SYRIZA that was pushing this and went off to form a new party called Lai. And they are, at 2% at best in the opinion polls, and that's their one position. So, no, I'm afraid that's not the case. There's also a right-wing version of getting out of the European Union, a neo-fascist version, which is the real danger. Then that's Golden Dawn in Greece. And they are not making a breakthrough either, thank heaven. And that does still speak to the extent to which, one has to look with admiration on the Greek people. Who, while they haven't been keen to leave the European Union, certainly want a European Union that is not neoliberal and egalitarian in their great majority, but they will not turn to the neo-fascist option. And that's very important in the context of the rise of the new right.
All right, Leo, we'll be back to you shortly, I think, in the next couple of weeks as this new team arrives in Athens, and they're going to be looking at deeper structural reforms for Greece. We hope to have you back then. Thank you for today.
Well, we've been doing this a long time, Sharmini. It'd be good to say finally we've got to stop meeting this way.
That's right. Thank you so much, Leo.
So long.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.